Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's National Arts Club program on sustainable fashion. My name is Laura Daly, and I'm a member of the Roundtable Committee. For those of you not familiar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Annually, the club offers over 150 programs free to the public, which include exhibitions, theatrical, musical, and dance performances, lectures, and readings. To learn more about the club, we invite you to visit us at nationalartsclub.org, or you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. On behalf of the President of the Board of Governors and the Roundtable Committee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event featuring Erin Beatty, founder of Rentrayage, who will tell us about how her company is mitigating the effects of fast fashion on our environment. Please use the Q&A function for any questions, which Erin will address after her presentation. Now, please welcome Erin Beatty.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you to the National Arts Club for having me. Let me share my presentation with you all. And I'm really looking forward to the question and answer session at the end. So feel free to throw difficult questions at me. I love speaking about Rentrayage, and I'm really excited to take this opportunity to explain to you all, why I started it and why I do what I do. Oops, hold on one second. Sorry. This is a little different. You're gonna have to bear with me. Okay, so the meaning of Rentrayage. I actually discovered this word when I was jobless and had a colicky baby from whom I was trying to escape. There was an exhibit at the MoMA about Louise Bourgeois, who had always inspired me, in particular her textile works. And I went to the exhibit and I was just completely moved. It was at a very vulnerable time in my life. And I bought a children's book for my children. And in the book, they discuss the importance of Louise Bourgeois' mother on her work. And her mother was a sewer and a weaver. And her job, the way she brought money in for the family, was to mend the tapestries, which were kind of fraying at the edges in these ancient French chateaus. That act of mending is called rentrayage. And it means to reweave across the cut, to mend, to make whole again. This is a video that we made about rentrayage when we first started it. Oh no, I'm having technical difficulties. I apologize. Let me just quickly try again. We just played this, so we're going to assume that it's going to work. These Zoom presentations are always tricky. All right, let's try again. Here we go. It was just where I was, my past job had shut down, the business had shut down. I was 8 months pregnant. It was a difficult election, and I gave birth to a colicky baby. And I was just very sad, to be totally honest. And I didn't know about the future of anything, let alone fashion. And I didn't know what I could do. And so I felt a little helpless. And the only way to fight out of that is to think about what you can do differently. when I really thought about it, the power that I had was the fact that I know how to design, I know how to make clothes, and that perhaps I could change the way that I know it, or I could change the way that I've worked in the past in order to create something that felt new. And I wanted to create something that didn't feel at all creatively limited. I wanted to create something that felt weird and felt emotional. I moved into vintage because I just felt the most creative freedom working that way. The hardest part was that's a completely different process than I've ever used in the past. It's not sketching, it's not sourcing fabrics, it's looking at a garment and feeling whatever its energy is and figuring out what it needs to become in order to remain interesting, and then trying to do it over and over again. Do you see any spiders? What do you want to see, Ezzy?
That spider. Spider on that tree right there. I see spider.
Those are my children who look very cute in this presentation. Let's see, can we get past this? Oh, goodness. Let me just try once more. Hold on one second. I'm going to do this one more time. I apologize. This is a worst case scenario Zoom presentation situation. Okay. I'm assuming everyone can see. Please, someone indicate to me if you cannot see. All right, so Rentrayage is a sustainable lifestyle company. Today, we're going to focus on the fashion. But from the very beginning, I wanted to provide beautiful items and goods to people who were consumed with the same guilt that I was feeling about every single purchase I was making. I'm going to read this slide because it's beautifully written, and then I'll go into it a little bit more deeply. Our singular concept is radical: to create a profitable production model using recycled materials to craft luxury fashion and homewares. Reimagining and reanimating what has been discarded, we create new shape, new form, new style, new beauty, and new value. Beyond stitching things back together, we're laying the groundwork for a new way of thinking about production and consumption. The idea originated from fashion, but the roadmap extends to home and apothecary, offering our consumer elevated, sustainable options in every category in an increasingly eco-minded marketplace. We are the dawning of a new definition of a sustainable lifestyle brand. Rentrayage is here to create massive change. And certainly right now, we're extremely grounded in this idea of recycling, an idea that I think is only going to grow. But we're also very open to regenerative materials, to really being on the cusp of what sustainable development looks like, what it means. Ideally, we're creating items that people are super proud to wear because it's so clear the way that these clothes present their values to the outside world, which frankly is the whole point of getting dressed, right? Sorry. I think this will help. All right, so I think we're beyond the technical difficulties, but you never know. You never know. So a little bit about me. I first told my parents that I wanted to be a fashion designer when I was in 4th grade. I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado, not the bastion of most famous fashion designers. And my mom was on sabbatical at Harvard when I was in 4th grade. And one of my friend's parents was a designer. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. And they might as well have laughed me out of the room. My father was a lawyer. My mother was a professor. They were like, you could just say you want to be an actress. So it was insisted upon that I go to a classic liberal arts college. I chose UCLA because it was in a gigantic city. And while I was there, I interned at Chanel, I interned at Nylon Magazine. I just want to mention that these were internships got with like sheer grit, not through connections whatsoever. And upon graduating, I actually entered into the retail management program, which was a program at the Gap under Mickey Drexler. And it rotates you through merchandising, planning, production. So I got this really amazing year-long course in retail. I got placed in merchandising for Gap brand and realized that I was entirely in spreadsheets, which was like not a good place for my brain. And eventually went to my boss and was like, this is not working out. They were like, this is not working out. And because it was an amazing company and because they really wanted to keep me, they actually promoted me and moved me to New York to be a product director. So it was more product development, really working with the design team. It was there that I met Pina Furlisi. Pina Furlisi is a very well-known kind of internal designer in the industry. Theory, Mark by Marc Jacobs, Alexander McQueen, kind of all these names. And she became my mentor. And I finally kind of mustered the guts to go to her and say, Pina, I really want to be a designer. And she was like, if you want to be a designer, you better go back to design school because no one's going to listen to you if you don't. So I went back to Parsons. I was not that old, frankly, I was like 24, and which seemed extraordinarily old at the time, but in retrospect. And while I was there, I interned at Donna Karan Collection, and I ended up following Pina to a small contemporary company called Genera. And I worked there for a few years, and the writing was kind of on the wall that it wasn't going to work out. And I was looking for a new job, and basically an acquaintance, like a friend of a friend, approached me with this idea to make clothing out of vintage African congas, which are like the, printed African fabrics that the women wear in Eastern Africa. And so next thing I knew, I was in Kenya developing this collection. And within 2 years, Suno had completely taken off. We were in every major retailer. I mean, Net, Bergdorf's, Barney's, Neiman's, Saks. We were finalists for the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund twice. We won a CFDA Emerging Designer Award. We were also named finalists for the very first LVMH prize. So we were next to Jacquemus and Simone Rocha. It was an incredible experience. I presented to Karl Lagerfeld, who was like a god, in case you're wondering. And then in 2014, I was actually named creative director of Tory Burch in tandem with my position at Suno, which was super intense. And I don't totally recommend it, but it was an amazing experience. And what's so interesting is in 2016, it was like the bottom fell out from under me. My partner's father, who was the main investor in Suno, pulled out. They didn't really want to continue the brand without my partner. Suddenly, I didn't have a job. I was pregnant and waddling into interviews. The climate of the country was really changing. It was getting extraordinarily divisive. And I was very sad. And so after the birth of the baby, really consumed by guilt with this knowledge of the way that fashion was created, I was interviewing with all of these major creative director positions, all brands that you know. And I just knew that I would be doing something to create more waste, and I couldn't stomach it. And so I ended up just consulting. I consulted with a rug maker. I consulted with small fashion lines. I did interim styling. I styled a few houses. And it was kind of this amazing time for me to really explore these other areas creatively and to start researching sustainability. So I started visiting with all the fabric vendors that I knew and really understanding what was in the marketplace. And what was in the marketplace was pretty brown and green. So we'll get more to that in a few minutes. Oh my God, what? Okay, sorry. Not one of my dry runs was I unable to turn the pages. Not one. Okay, so fashion is a waste problem. I'm sure if you signed up for this, you're aware that fashion is a waste problem, right? Like I think at this point we're all aware, but we don't have any idea what to do about it. Which is what I find with all of these environmental problems. Like we're all so confused about what to do. So 4% of global waste is generated by the fashion industry. Every 1 second, this is a crazy statistic, every 1 second, one garbage truck full of clothing is burned or dumped into a landfill. This is often clothes that has been rejected by Goodwill. You know, Africa is overflowing with vintage clothes. This is not an issue of people no longer having clothes. It's an issue of too much clothes around the world. The amount that clothing consumption will rise by 2030 is 63%. Only 1% of clothes are recycled into new garments. Fashion accounts for 20% of global wastewater and 4% of freshwater withdrawals. And in 2015, with the Paris Agreement, we set out to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The fashion industry is on track to exceed this by almost double. That didn't work. Surprise. Rentrayage has a solution. And this is really our solution to this problem. We are very lucky to be stepping into this market totally new, right? It's much harder to go backwards if you're a large company. So we're able to kind of come in and figure out a true new way of working. We want to make fashion's waste covetable. You know, we want these clothes to stand out and to stand for something. Our design process is inspired by what already exists. This is critical. As a designer, in the past, you know, I was interviewed backstage. It was almost like the crazier the idea, the crazier the inspiration, the better. And you would be, you know, you'd be designing a new collection every 4 weeks. It wasn't like your perspective had changed so drastically. And yet you were meant to come up with something totally new. And this means all new print developments. This means all new fabric developments. This means that every single print and fabric you're ordering to a minimum, generally of like 200 yards. So the design process itself is extraordinarily wasteful. So changing that from the very beginning is critical. Because Rentrayage relies on recycled materials, our process does not require any additional water. Like there's no water wastage happening at Rentrayage right now. And then Rentrayage has made eliminating the use of new materials central to its business model so that we can create a fashion production sort of model with a positive environmental impact that we can also bring to other people. More on that in a little bit. So this is the development process. I used pictures from our very first collection because honestly, I had a lot of pictures from our very first collection. Also, that collection was so special because it was so one of a kind. What we're making now is still unique, each piece, but we have to be able to produce for Neiman's. We have to be able to produce for Nordstrom. So they need to look much more similar than was our approach the very first collection. So that's a picture of me shopping at a vintage store, which is the way that we often start. And that's a picture of me wearing a dress that, you know, I wouldn't buy for myself, but there was something about it that I liked, right? The next picture is a picture of dead stock fabric. I'm going to talk more about dead stock fabric later, but unfortunately the earth is covered in dead stock fabrics, fabrics that have not been used, that fashion houses never put to good use and, you know, exist in excess of thousands of yards. The next thing that I would do is start to draw a sketch. So figuring out what I want that to become. I'm thinking it's a top. I want it to have a little peplum, and I want the sleeve to feel more modern, fuller. I work with Albert, our tailor, who is brilliant. Obviously, this is filled with pictures of me. My team is the most amazing team in the world. They are all working with me for very little because they believe so much in this. I just am going to throw that in there right now. Sorry. But also, Albert and I will go through and fit a garment. This first collection I fit on myself. I was actually a little skinnier pre-pandemic, but also we use a fit model. And you can see the creation of the peplum here, really figuring out what that's going to look like, really draping the sleeve and looking at how we like it on the body. And then you see the final images, which were the lookbook images, and how kind of elegant and surprising that style feels, which is the whole point. And then these are just some pictures from our office. And it's just fascinating because this is really like the way we work. These are a lot of shirting scraps. We use men's shirting all the time. There's a bunch of shirting dead stocks available, but also I love the influence of menswear, and we take advantage of these scraps in everything. We'll make Christmas stockings. We'll use them for trims, for bindings. The next picture is actually of vintage table linens, napkins. We do a lot of interesting things with these vintage napkins that like no one really can figure out how to use, or they've got weird stains on them and you don't want to use them. So we cut them up to create something new. They're really stunningly beautiful. The next picture is piles of vintage. We exist in piles of vintage all the time. And then the last picture, these are actually two of our best-selling styles. So we have the corset blazer, and then we have the trucker puffer. And the trucker puffer really is, both of these have sold to major department stores, and we create them over and over and over again. So our customer, and this is what's interesting is, I know our customer exists because I exist. And I was so hungry for this. But it's hard for her because, yes, we've been adopted by some of these major retailers, but stores are very scared of something that feels new. So I have found in my own shopping that I've had to do so much research around the sustainability of brands claiming that they're sustainable. Like, what does that mean? Is recycled poly really sustainable? These are the questions that I'm constantly kind of facing in my own choices. However, there is a customer who is seeking, a luxury customer who's seeking out sustainability. So 61% of luxury consumers said a brand's environmental policies are considered when making purchases. 9.8 billion is the global ethical fashion, is the amount that the global ethical fashion market will reach by 2025. 67% of consumers consider the use of sustainable materials to be an important purchasing factor. 85% of luxury market growth is driven by millennials and Gen Z. 73% of millennials are willing to spend more with a sustainable brand. I assure you, Gen Z will not accept a brand that's not sustainable. They are, in the next few years, likely going to see climate change in a completely different way. We've worked in a way of denial. It is going to become something that's front and center and as a part of their existence. And it's just not going to be an option, So our collection consists of 3 categories. Upcycled vintage. This is supposed to be the most aspirational aspect of our collection. It's the vintage styles. This is our lookbook from fall, and it's actually a singer named Sudan Archives who just came out with an amazing new album. And you can see the denim skirt is actually a vintage skirt. What I'm wearing is a vintage sweatshirt, and it's kind of recreated with dead stock fabrics, so it looks very similar. For instance, for a department store, we would always run a navy sweatshirt, but it would probably always have a different logo on the front. The denim, it's going to look very similar every single time, but each one is unique. The next category is dead stock. And dead stock, I can show you more when we're going through some pictures of the brand. Dead stock, it's like the dress itself is going to look to you like any dress that you see on the market, except for hopefully it's designed in a very cool way. But what's interesting about dead stock is, in my experience with large companies, I was occasionally asked by the head of production to go and see warehouses. When I say warehouses, I mean football fields filled with, warehouses in China that were the size of football fields, filled from like the floor to the extraordinarily elevated ceiling with rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls of fabric, all of which the company was never going to use. Now, every company has these, dirty secret. Every factory has these, dirty secret. They have them because they have to buy to a certain quantity to make samples. Perhaps the samples are never bought. They have them because they buy a ton of fabric for a style that they assume is going to be a best-selling style. It's not. They cancel the rest of the production. It's a wasteful business. And so I, being acutely aware of these fabrics, always wanted these to be a part of our business model. And it's a great way to work because they're beautiful. Like, so often they're stunningly beautiful. If you look at this green silk dress, if you look at this black chiffon skirt, the fabrics are stunning. You couldn't get a higher quality fabric. And those are dead stock fabrics that I found in warehouses in Italy. And then finally, recycled regenerative fabrics and yarns. So we're waiting for the market to catch up. Right now, a lot of recycled fabrics have minimums of like 2,000 yards, which we're just too small to grapple with. They're also not that great yet. They're like not that soft, and they're kind of not that sexy. But I do love recycled yarns, and that's because the fibers are thicker. So when you recycle them, it still feels like a very elevated product. And so these sweaters that we're offering are 100% recycled cashmere. And it just doesn't feel like a compromise at all. So the next thing is just how we want to sell the collection. Right now, we do have a few major retailers. Neiman's is a big retailer for us. Bergdorf's is a very big retailer for us. Ikram has really stood by us, as well as some other boutiques. But we definitely see the opportunity to create our own sales model. Obviously, we have our own website because nowadays you have to have your own website. But there's so much more educational opportunity for this. We really want to educate our consumer about how we make what we make, why we make what we make, where we make what we make. We want to tell them these stories. We want to bring them in. We want to show them why these choices matter. We would love to open, a storefront in 2025. And our vision for this is it's equal to parts boutique, gallery, beauty counter, event space, showroom. I want an exhibit in there that kids can play with and parents can read and understand what is wastewater. Why should we care? Why are we running out of fresh water? How is fashion contributing to that? Also, huge opportunity for shop in shops. Eventually Apothecary will be important to us. And I love the idea of taking your beautiful recycled glass container and refilling your sort of natural body oils at the Rentrayage shop in shop in Nordstrom's, So these are all part of the visions, but having these direct sale outlets where you can sell really special one-of-a-kind pieces, these really elevated styles, it can really bring the vision to life. Of course, wholesale is also intrinsically important to grow the brand because we're so tiny right now. Partnerships. This is also something that's hugely important to me because I think that what we're doing it can extend outwards. Sometimes people are mad about the cost of our t-shirts because it's so expensive, the cut work. And what I say to people is make them yourself. All I want is for you to make them yourself. Hopefully what you're buying from me is stuff that you're just like, wow, I can't even believe that, And I love the concept of extending these ideas out in a more mass way, as well as to other luxury brands, if they're ever willing to kind of admit that they have this waste. So we recently launched a partnership with Madewell. It was a collaboration, and we Rentrayaged previous Madewell collections. We used their dead stock as well as their unsold styles to create new bodies that you can see some of the pictures of here. Many of the styles sold out. There's still a few left of things that we actually made from old vintage samples that they had in their office. So I actually think that this is it's a great opportunity for other brands and for us to kind of teach this methodology to other people. Rentrayage Home. This is a real passion project for me, and we really are trying to figure out how to develop this. It's interesting because you think sustainability has really crept into home, and it's actually, it's hard. It's hard getting all of these people to work in different ways. So we currently source from another number of artisanal, home vendors. We have recycled glasses from Morocco. We have recycled glasses from Mexico. We have these amazing wood bowls that were made by an artisan who finds trees that have fallen down in the forest and carves these bowls. We have this amazing plate collaboration that we do with a ceramicist in Italy, where the plates break in the kiln and they stitch them back together with wire, and then they turn them into pieces of art that you can hang on your wall. So that's what we currently offer in home. We're also developing out our own home collection. We're developing out glasses that we really hope to launch in spring 2023 by April or May. We'll see. And these are going to be 50% recycled. The factory is hoping to get to 100% recycled shortly. Linens, table linens made from eco bamboo viscose, which is a regenerative fabric, as well as our one-of-a-kind kind of upcycled patchwork table linens. We would love to do bedding eventually. And then we're also working on a servingware program, which is dead stock plates that we're reglazing with ash, a glaze made from ash from a recycling plant. And they're stunning, they're beautiful, and they're totally unique. And then finally, Apothecary, which is an area, Apothecary is a big development. You need a chemist. It takes a lot of time. So it's not something that we've started yet, but it's absolutely part of my vision for the brand. I love the idea of functional body oils and recycled containers that are easily recyclable. I am a huge clean beauty user. And recently, I cleaned out my bathroom, and separating out the pumps and the plastic and the recycled parts and then cleaning all of them. It was just such an effort. So making sure that the way forward with the containers, if you're not going to reuse them, how you recycle them, making sure that that's extraordinarily clear to the consumer is very important to me. Press, marketing, public relations, this is something that we have to do. I would say selling ourselves isn't not my strong point at all. But we have been lucky. We've been featured in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, in T Magazine, in Vogue. And, the more that we can get the word out there, the more that people find out about our stuff. We had a huge sales increase online when the article in the New York Times came out. And there are so many consumers desperate for clean products that they don't feel guilty about. It's just hard to find the brands. The next slide is about Rentrayage. So this was actually a total surprise. We were included in last year's Met exhibit in America, a lexicon of fashion. We're actually on the top floor amongst the new designers, and it was just so flattering to be recognized. I'll read what they had written about us on the plaque. Continuity, uninterrupted connection, succession, or union. Erin Beatty debuted Rentrayage in 2019. Formerly co-designer of the label Suno, Beatty has turned her focus to sustainable production and the creation of new garments from old ones. Here, Beatty fused sections of 3 dresses together along 2 seams, one horizontal and one vertical. Although the original silhouettes remain largely unaltered, the short sleeve on the right side of the garment and the full sleeve on the left skew the proportions of the new design. This says so much about what we're trying to do. We don't want our clothes to not feel unusual. We know that people want to express who they are through the way that they get dressed. Also, this recognition of what we're doing, the idea that this truly is the future. We know that fashion knows about us. We've seen ourselves copied. It's just a matter of getting our voices out there. So the next few slides are just some previous collections and some quotes that have been published about us. This is from the New York Times article that was published last year. Rentrayage, a brand focused on reworked vintage and on training the world to relook at things that have been discarded. These are some images from our most recent spring collection. Many of these are dead stock items, so these can be produced over and over and over again and look exactly the same. So from a retail perspective, from a retailer, this is something that they can happily buy into and know that it will always look the same. This jacket right here is actually made from a vintage trench coat, so it will always look a little bit unique and a little bit different. This is from our most recent holiday collection. You can see, again, mixing the vintage blazer, updating a vintage jean jacket and another vintage jean jacket, combining it with wool fabrics, but then also using the dead stock materials to create these kind of new and unexpected combinations. Clothing that all kind of works together, but also helps you stand out when you wear it. And then our most recent fall collection, this was one of our best-selling styles, this blazer, as well as this dress. And this was all on Sudan Archives, who is like becoming a very major kind of up-and-coming performance artist, musician. And then finally, I really wanted to include some pictures of our first collection, just because it was such a piece of art, you know, and I really knew we actually did our first presentation in a gallery, and the clothes were just hanging on these Louise Bourgeois inspired racks. And I really wanted that to be the birthplace of Rentrayage. I wanted that creativity to be the starting point, because I believe that starting the brand in that way was so critical. And each of these pieces was extremely one of a kind. We were actually able to recreate them, but it was a lot. It was just like completely different for us. And so, you know, I'm glad that we started it. And then, I mean, I'm not glad that we started right before a pandemic, but I am glad that we had a little bit of time to really figure out this production process, because now we can do it over and over and over again. And launching this way was just, it was such a beautiful entrance into the market. And then finally, one of my favorite quotes from Vogue, from Nicole Phelps. Beatty brings her subtle sense of eccentricity to every piece. In her hands, conscious consumerism doesn't mean the end of fun. And that right there is Beatty's first step to success. So thank you all. That took a little bit longer, but I'm excited to get your questions. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm just not a tech guru. It's just, it is what it is.
Thank you, Erin. That was really terrific. All right, so let's get to the questions. And there are many. So let's get started. All right, so a viewer says, what happens to the clothes that are donated to the nonprofit recycler at the Union Square Green Market?
Now, anything, you know, listen, first of all, I don't work with the recycling company, so, but anything that can be recycled probably is recycled. Now, the problem is it's very hard right now to recycle often kind of mixed materials. So say, for instance, you have a poly cotton blend. They are coming out with chemical processes that will separate the poly from the cotton. I don't know that that's in mass use. They do things like they'll create insulation from old clothes as well. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, we should all be recycling our clothes. There should be clothing recycling drop-offs. There's a lot of clothes that, you know, you don't want to give to a Goodwill, let's be honest, undergarments. So figuring out the way to recycle these clothes is critical, but also amazing chemical processes are being developed that will allow us to actually separate out the materials and then create new fabrics. And I'm here for it.
That's great. Next question. Do you offer an internship program for college students?
We do. Just email us. You can email, you know, you can email info@rentrayage.com. All of our best interns came through all of our best interns have come through, they've come to us directly. They're all passionate about sustainable fashion, and we're really fun to work with, really. It's a fun group of people.
No doubt.
Truly one of my favorite hires was a previous intern. So it's, I'm a strong believer in internships.
Excellent. Please give us some examples of how water is used in the fashion industry.
Oh, I mean,
that's not something that you would automatically think about.
I know, but every fabric is washed. Every fabric is dyed. Every fabric is printed. Every fabric is treated. They're often treated with softeners. Each of those is its own wash process. That water that's left over after that wash process is wastewater, right? So how do you dispose of that water? In many places, they don't clean it. They're not testing the pH to make sure that it's okay when they're pouring it back into a river. So yeah, there's a lot of water used in every single garment. It's one of the dirty little secrets.
Yeah. Someone wants to know if they can give you their vintage fabric.
Probably. We get approached more and more. I think it's critical that someday we are able to recycle clothing for people, that someday we are able to take in vintage that meets like certain requirements, or that we're able to help someone kind of figure out where to put it. We don't have a single full-time employee right now. Everyone is, people work a lot, but we're all freelancers. We're a tight little team of like 5 to 7 people, depending on the season, so we just don't, we just don't have the capacity to take it all in yet. But yeah, you can always email me. It's Erin@rentrayage.com.
Great. You mentioned encouraging people to rentrayage their own clothing. Would you ever help them in terms of providing patterns or design classes or yarn for hand knitters, things like that?
I actually think that in terms of future content, that's super important. Again, it's just like a matter of hours in the day. So, we have done tutorials. We've done tutorials for Vogue on how to make certain t-shirts, and we've done tutorials on how to, we've made like skirts out of ties for the New York Times. And yeah, definitely in the future, I think that's a huge opportunity. It's just a matter of hours that we can work,
Prioritizing, that's all.
Exactly
what it is. Might you eventually have the ability to design and manufacture for the non-luxury market?
Well, we've already worked with Madewell, and we actually manufactured all of those clothes. Not to great profit, but yeah, I think as the world changes, as people, the world is used to working in a certain way, right? In everything. Like, we're not the only industry that feels a little broken right now, right? And it's about people figuring out how to work in different ways. Mm-hmm. And I have an extraordinarily strong belief that we're going to figure that out. I do believe we're going to move into a more circular system of making clothing. I also think that we'll figure out more regenerative materials. So yes, I would love to be able to offer clothes at a more affordable price point. And we will someday.
What do you do with your leftover fabric pieces once you cut up a vintage piece?
Oh, you saw, we keep everything. We're total hoarders, to our detriment. There are certain things that we're never going to use that again. And then often we send stuff to Fab Scrap, who we have a relationship with. And they do, they will recycle things they'll either use it and sell it to people, or they'll recycle it into, insulation or other products.
Next question is, how do you suggest designers who are just starting out to incorporate sustainable practices and maintain those practices as they grow? I guess that's something you also you're dealing with as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, you just have to think about everything, right? Like, what light bulbs are you using? What are your materials? Where are you getting your materials? You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to put people's feet to the fire. I remember sitting down with Italian mills and being like, you guys, why don't you have organic fabrics? Why aren't they not, and they was just like, it's a trend. It's a trend, Erin. It's like, I don't think it's a trend. And now they're all falling in line a little bit. For me, if I was just going to use like a GOTS certified silk, it wasn't enough. I needed to make a larger statement. I think there's a lot of brands coming out with like these sustainable basics, but it should be known that all of those basics, all of those sustainable fabrics, like the minimums are often 200, 500, 1,200 yards. That's a lot of fabric that you're probably not going to sell through if you're a tiny little brand. So it's about just kind of thinking through how to do things differently. For us, it was vintage, and I had always been fascinated with vintage, but after the closure of Suno and just like struck by guilt, I really started buying more and more vintage clothes. And I really started to realize that I had to change them in order to make them feel cool. It was that simple. It was just that's where it came from.
Okay, this question is about all the dead stock fabric that you source. What is the process to obtain it? Are there any rights issues because there may be patterns in the fabric that were created by that particular company? Are they possessive at all over, what they're handing over to you? Are there any agreements you have to make with them outside of just paying them for these rolls of fabric?
I don't use any fabrics that have like a highly recognizable print, although honestly, there's so much fashion out there. Like, I have a hard time believing like someone's going to recognize that Stella McCartney print from like 2017. But if it says a brand name, I don't use it. That's off limits.
So there are no royalty issues when you
No, they've sold them. They have
site.
sold those fabrics off with the knowledge that someone is going to buy them. Now, what I've heard from, I fly, and basically if you want like the nitty gritty, I fly to Italy. I go to a bunch of dead stock warehouses. I do it in Italy because that's where the best ones are. It's best to go straight to the source. Go to a bunch of dead stock warehouses. I take a bunch of samples. I go home and I have to order really quickly, and I have to order enough to produce with. And they have told me that like often when they're at a brand buying, there will be a cage full of additional fabrics that are going to get burned because they have the brand name on it. So those fabrics are just off limits, and that's what they'll do with it. That's why Rentrayage for these bigger brands is such a great opportunity. It's a way of bragging about what you're doing as opposed to, kind of hiding in shame.
Mm-hmm. Do you consider ThreadUp a recycling company?
I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with that.
You're with me, yeah.
There's a bunch out there.
Yeah, who would you consider? Are there really serious competitors to what you're doing?
Well, there are other people who are upcycling. I don't think there's anyone who's like committed to it in the same way that we have. There's certainly no one who's tackled home, and and a lot of them, it's like you get to a certain place and it just feels too hard. And so they start kind of copying from a vintage style, which I completely understand and respect.
Yeah.
I think that like our level of commitment to this is a bit more advanced. And the fact that we've managed to kind of get it into major retailers as well as the Met.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Obviously, profitability is the key to the growth of sustainable fashion, because if it's not a business that can be maintained, that nothing's going to happen. So what are your thoughts in terms of maximizing your profitability through the process of recycling? Are there like major, ideas or thought process that you go through to make sure that whatever you're doing, keeps you,
Make money. I
well,
mean, yeah, like
keeps
we're
you
always
in
thinking about
business.
making
Yeah.
money, but like, if that's what leads you, it's like, good luck. You know,
No,
that,
but I mean, obviously,
that being said, yeah, we have enough dead stock fabrics on hand at any collection to make millions and millions of dollars. Now, I also strongly believe that recycled fabrics are the next wave, right? So I'm also positioning myself to be right there, to be the first to launch and celebrate those fabrics. I'm also in talks, for instance, with people who are making leather out of mushrooms that looks and feels exactly like leather. I'm also dealing with the home products, right? Where there's this regenerative bamboo viscose that's not recycled, but it actually takes more carbon from the atmosphere than it ever produces. And so like, there's just, the opportunities are so limitless. And if I were to say, I'm not going to do this sustainability thing because I really just need to make money, like, why? I would just keep designing the random clothes that I always used to design, and honestly, it all looks the same anyways. Like it just does. It's all starting to look the same anyways. So I just think this is the future, and I think we're going to figure it out.
Since you had so many years in traditional retail, what are the key takeaways that you still use in your own business?
I am a very unusual kind of new designer in that the person who is next to me at any given moment, the person I rely on, is a financial planner. That's her background. And like, to me, it's just extraordinarily critical, right? The finances of it all, making it work, making it make sense, growing the brand in a responsible way it's the most important thing. So yeah, that I think is a little more unusual. I mean, you'd be surprised.
No, it's just very inspiring. How would you describe the Rentrayage girl?
Well, we have a lot of clothes that are a little bit more straightforward, but I actually think that I like to think of her as someone who, she's looking for these classic pieces that stand out, but don't scream out for attention, right? She wants those kinds of clothes that you put on and you feel like you're making a statement, but you don't feel like you're blending into the wall, but you also aren't desperately kind of attracting attention.
Look at me, look at me. Yes.
Exactly. And that, to me, like that's like the essence of cool. That's exactly what I want to create. I think that those girls can walk into a room, they can be dressed up, they can be dressed down. I also think we have huge opportunities with denim. I think we have huge opportunities with outerwear. These seem to be the things that are very and with dresses, these seem to be the things that are most covetable that we're creating.
Do you think it's possible for the traditional retail business to reduce all the fabric that they don't use or throw away?
It's really hard. It's really hard. There's so many people that have input. In a traditional business, there's so many people that have input into the designs, and everyone wants to believe that they will know a bestseller from a sketch. And it never works out that way. I mean, occasionally, it's been built off of something that has sold before. It's really hard. And it's a business that demands overdevelopment because people want to be spoiled for choice. That is the way that we function as a society. It's like the way we've learned to be. It's just unavoidable. There's clothes, like if you walk around New York City, there's just clothing everywhere. So yeah, I mean, I believe everything is possible. Maybe with an avatar, I'm not sure.
Well, this was really wonderful. And thank you for your time. It was very fascinating. Let me just make sure, are there any other questions? what's left in the Q&A is just, basically you go, girl. So
Aw, well, thanks everyone. I'm going. I'm sorry. I had technical difficulties. I swear, Laura, you can attest to the fact that I did a run.
it was perfect when we did the dry run. I swear to God.
I know.
So I want to thank everyone for joining us for this wonderful presentation. Thank you, Erin. It was fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
And if you would like to share this with friends or see it again, it will be on the National Arts Club YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. So again, thank you, Erin.
Of course,
And
thank you all so much for having me. Really, it's such a wonderful opportunity to get to spread the word about what we're doing.
So good night, everyone, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.
Good night.